Hey guys, welcome to the Screwup Chronicles podcast. This episode, I'm going to do something a little bit different. It's maybe a little bit less biblical as some of my other podcasts have been, but I think it's just as important. You're going to want to stick around for this one. We're going to talk about why people do or don't do good deeds, or random acts of kindness, and what it is inside of us that prevents us from doing that. So you're going to want to stick around for this episode. We're going to jump right into it right now. All right, guys. Welcome to the Screwup Chronicles podcast. Sorry, I got to grab a couple notes here, but we're going to talk in this episode, like I said in the intro, about why it is that people don't do good deeds more often for people, and why that is important for you as an individual, but also kind of as obviously as a human being and as a member of your community. One of the main things that we talk about in church a lot is that church isn't a charity. A lot of people think of it as a charity. And because it's registered as a nonprofit organization, people get this mindset that church is a charity. But church isn't about that. We've talked about that in episodes before. We talked about how church is a gathering of people, or the actual church is a gathering of all of us, kind of to come together and recharge from each other and share in worshiping God and things like that. But the church itself is really just a body of people who believe and who go out and try to do their best to act in accordance with the Bible and do the things that Jesus, kind of charged us to do. And one of the things that he kind of charged us to do in the Bible was to essentially do things for people who are less fortunate than us. And I read this really, really cool story about that actually it was on Facebook, I think, earlier this week. So we're going to talk about that story and kind of what that means. And it's Christmas. I'm actually recording this on Christmas Day. My beautiful wife bought me a new mixer, which is over here to my left. So I'm super excited about that. But I had to run away from the house and do this podcast because the spirit of Christmas is, giving, and I wanted to explore why it is that people maybe don't do more of it throughout the year. So a couple housekeeping things, which I almost forgot to mention, guys. Our podcast is growing week over week. I continue to get more and more listeners. I'm working on a new studio. Right now I'm actually on stage where our worship team does our Sunday morning service, but I'm working on putting together a new studio for the podcast. So that's really, really exciting. Please, guys, keep supporting the podcast. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, please subscribe to the podcast. Also, if you haven't checked us out, we're on YouTube now as well. We're filming these, and you can kind of you can kind of see me, just get a visual, and it'll also give you some links to the other episodes that we have done. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe on YouTube to the channel and hit the notification bell to make sure that you get notified every time we have a new episode out. I don't do these on a regular schedule, unfortunately. One's time, but the other thing is that, it's when something I think that's important comes to me, that's when I generally tend to do these podcasts. So again, guys, thank you so much for subscribing to the podcast, and keep sharing it with people. Keep giving it to the people that you think need to hear it, and continue to help me grow this thing. I'm having a blast doing it. We've made it past the 7-episode hurdle that they talk about. New podcasts usually generally don't make it past 7 episodes. We made it past that. So make sure you continue to share that. Sorry about that. I just had to get a drink. Okay, wow. First time that happened, so really professional. Okay, moving on. So in the spirit of giving, we have an episode on our podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, it's not on there, but go check it out on Google Podcasts or somewhere like that. We have an episode where we talked about giving, and we talked a lot about giving to the church and what it means and how we should be good stewards with God's money. But once we give stuff away, it's not our responsibility to worry about what happens with it. So check that episode out. This is less about that and more about what it is internally that prevents people from giving. And I think a lot of us inherently want to give back as much as we possibly can. Some of us limit ourselves in our thinking in that we don't have enough money to give. We forget that we were given talents by God to share. Some of us are really good at art. I am not one of those people. I can't draw a stick figure. Some of us are really good at music. I'm a decent musician, but the worship team that uses this stage behind me, they're much better than I am. Some of us were given the gift of labor, or the ability to build, or the ability just time in general. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has something that they're good at, and those are the types of things that we can give. It doesn't have to be money. It can just be time. And sometimes, even if you don't think that you have a gift, just showing up and being there, you'll find a place. You'll find something to do. But what is it that prevents us from doing these random acts of kindness outside of our church group or outside of the norm? What prevents you from Monday, doing something, or Tuesday doing something? And it comes down to a couple of things. A lot of people tend to think, first and foremost, I think that somebody else is going to do it, so I don't have to. And I don't think that's a negative thing. I don't think they think that somebody else is going to do it, so I don't have to. Literally. I just think that they're like, well, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to. And a lot of the times that happens. A lot of the times that's right. But what happens for you is, unfortunately, you missed out on a wonderful opportunity to connect with somebody, and to do something that maybe you wouldn't normally do. Take yourself out of your comfort zone. And oftentimes when we do that, we find that we got more out of it than we gave. And it's a weird thing how that works. I think Will Smith one time said that the greatest happiness is on the opposite side of your maximum fear. And this is kind of one of those fears. We have a fear sometimes that not only someone else is going to do it, but we have a fear sometimes that, people are going to see us do it. And this is a crazy one. People are going to look up to us, right? We have this fear, whether we think about it or not, we have this fear that we're going to be somebody to be admired, and that makes us uncomfortable, right? Because a lot of the times we don't feel like we are somebody to be admired. A lot of the times is we feel like if somebody were to look up to us as somebody to be admired, as somebody to learn from, or to follow, if you will, or be around, we feel like that we are fooling people, that we're faking it. When in reality, the opposite is happening, right? We have this desire to help people. If you've never read the book Leadership and Self-Deception, it's a really, really good book. It kind of talks about fooling yourself a little bit. It talks about this desire to help, and then you not helping is essentially deceiving yourself, right? So we have this desire to help. I think a lot of the times, I'm just going to use an example, right? You pull up to the stop sign and maybe you see a homeless guy with the sign, that says, "God bless homeless, anything will help." And you have a dollar on you or something of that nature, and you don't give it to him. And a lot of the times as you roll away, you'll justify not giving it to him. You'll be like, well, I only have $1, what's that going to do anyways? What's he going to do with it? Well, I don't have a lot of money either, so, maybe I'll need that dollar later. He's just going to use it to buy, alcohol, so I probably shouldn't have gave him that dollar in the first place. These are all things that we lie to ourselves to justify it, when in the reality is we're afraid of other people seeing us doing these good things. We're afraid, I think a lot of us deep down inside, that one, people are going to admire us, and then, we're not somebody to be admired. Two, we're afraid that people are going to judge us because they're having the same thought that we're having. They're lying to themselves behind you, the car behind you is going through the same process. The car behind you is literally saying the same thing in their head. So if I give them the dollar, well, they're going to be like, well, that fool gave him $1. He's just going to spend it on alcohol. These types of thoughts happen to us a lot throughout our day, whether we intend for them to happen or not. And these types of negative thoughts or lies that we tell ourselves are what prevent us from relying on each other as a community. They're what prevent us from growing together as a community. And that is the foundation of Christianity. Fellowship with one another is one of the foundations of Christianity. It's one of the foundations of Jesus' teaching. It's the reason why Jesus spent the majority of his ministry on the road talking to people, is because he wanted us to have those connections. He knew that the greatest way to have an effect on somebody's life wasn't to stand in front of hundreds of people every Sunday and preach. If he wanted thousands of people to stand in front of him, he could do that, and he would never have to leave where he was at. But he wanted to reach people where they were at. He wanted to touch people's lives where they needed to be touched. And it's one of the foundations of what our religion is founded on, is that concept. So why is it that we lie to ourselves and tell ourselves that someone else is going to do it? Or, I'm not somebody to be admired, and people are going to look up to me, and, that's one of the things for me, dude. I have the hardest time. I talk about this all the time with people at church, I was in the military, and people coming up and saying, thank you for your service, is one of the most awkward things for me, because I don't know how to respond. I don't feel like I did anything that was special. I don't feel like that I did anything that anybody else wouldn't do given the situation. And I know a lot of people don't join the military, so the argument is, yeah, well, I wouldn't join the military. Yeah, I wouldn't be a plumber. So I don't go around thanking every plumber for being a plumber. I don't feel like I did anything great or spectacular. So when people come around and thank me for my service, I find that it's awkward for me. And I think that that's just a micro kind of example of why we don't do more good deeds, right? Because somebody's going to come up and thank us, and somebody's going to tell us, how great we are. And I think for a lot of us deep down in the core, we're pretty humble people, which is, a good thing. The Bible calls for us to be humble. So that puts us in an awkward spot. Now somebody's telling me I'm great, or telling me that was such a good deed. The challenge is, how do we get past that, right? How do we move forward? Because we really do need to not deceive ourselves, and we really need to have those moments with people and do those, random acts of kindness and good deeds. And, the book talks about, you should really read it if you haven't. The book talks about, okay, so you see somebody with a flat tire on the road, and you have that immediate thought to, pull over and help them. But you're late for work. So do you still pull over and help them? Well, that depends. Do you work for yourself? Can you pull over and help them? All those things go into it. But the main focus isn't whether or not you actually pulled over and helped them. That's the goal. But the main focus is whether or not you lied to yourself about why you didn't pull over and help them. Those are the things that you have to overcome. You don't have to help everybody you see. That would be great if you could. The reality is you can't. But The point is whether or not you lie to yourself about why you didn't do it. And that's the secret, right? So I read this story about this man who was on a plane, and he had given he saw these 10 soldiers get on the plane, and they were coming around serving lunch on the plane, and the lunch cost like $5. And the man ordered his food, and he got it. And then the stewardess went and asked, essentially each one of the subsequent soldiers whether they were going to get a meal or not. And he overheard two of the soldiers talking about how, that was $5 for a plain lunch is kind of expensive, and they were going to wait until they got back to base to eat. And the man felt this urge to pay for their lunch. So he kind of called the stewardess over, and he paid for all 10 of their lunches. It was $50. Somebody overheard him do that. They gave him $25 and told him kind of, how nice that was. Their stewardess cried because her son was in Afghanistan. Later on, he was getting off the plane, and somebody else slipped $25 into his coat pocket and walked away before he even had a chance, to talk to them. And then he ran into those same soldiers outside the airport, and he gave them the $50 that he had gathered from the people. And he told them, hey, it's still a long ride to base, maybe you guys want to grab a sandwich somewhere. And he talked about how it made him feel, and he gained a little bit of notoriety for it. It wasn't like the guy's famous by any means, but the story kind of went around Facebook and Instagram and things like that, and he got gained some followers from it. And then a bunch of people kind of came on and told him how great he was. And then there was a group of people who kind of came on and told him, said, oh, the story's made up and this, that, and the other thing. And, if that really happened, there were some details in the story that might not have been, 100% accurate. And maybe the guy got him wrong. Maybe he forgot, by the time he told the story. Maybe it was a lie. But none of that's really the point of the story. The thing about that story is that it got us talking about, random acts of kindness. And he felt, in that story, he felt a desire to help these people out. And it was $5. It wasn't like he was making this huge gesture. So all total, we were looking at $50. And, it wasn't like he was making this kind of grand thing, but he felt the urge to help them out, and he acted on it. And he felt, a lot of pride in doing that. And I think that the more that we do that, the less we are susceptible to the lies that we tell ourselves. And that's really the goal, right? We talked about that a second ago, is to kind of get past those lies. So the challenge kind of this week as we go forward is going to be to try to identify those moments. I'm not going to ask anybody to give any more than they can. I'm not going to ask anybody to, put themselves in like harm's way or anything like that. But what I am going to ask you to do is try to identify those moments. The moments when you feel the urge to do something. So that's the first step, right? As you go along throughout your day, if you feel an urge to help somebody out, that's the moment. And you need to be able to identify that moment for this challenge to work. The second challenge is to, whether you help them out or not, to identify the lie that you told yourself in not helping them out. If you identify an area, an urge to help somebody out, and you help them out, great. But when you come across those moments where you're like, man, I really should stop and help that person, I can't, I've got to get to work, ask yourself if that was a lie, or if that was, I would love to help that person out, but I can't get to work. If I'm late again, I get fired. If I'm late, I get docked, whatever it is, that's not a lie, right? Identify those moments where you lie to yourself. Catch those moments, and not to punish yourself, but so that you can become more, self-aware of what is actually happening in your own mind. Our mind is unbelievable in tricking us. Our mind is unbelievable. We're the easiest person in the world to lie to. It's so easy to lie to yourself because you never have to check yourself. So the challenge here is to identify that lie and check yourself on it. Hey man, that guy has holding up a sign that he said anything would help. Well, I've only got a quarter. Yeah, it's probably not going to do anything anyways. I'm going to keep it. That's that moment. That's the lie. Now, I'm not asking you to give him the quarter. Maybe you only have a quarter. Don't give him your last quarter, man. But identify the moment. The more and more we become cognizant of what we're telling ourselves, the more often you're going to react on those urges to help somebody. So that's what we're going to do. Let me know how it goes. Screwupchronicles@gmail.com. Facebook us. You can send us a message on Facebook, facebook.com/screwup, I think, or just search for the Screwup Chronicles. YouTube, the Screwup Chronicles. Man, the Screwup Chronicles is everywhere. Please like and share this. But yeah, shoot me a message. I would love to hear kind of, short email. You don't have to tell me the whole story, but I'd love to hear those moments that you were able to identify that you lied to yourself. And I'd love to hear the moments that, you were able to identify a situation you were able to help. But I want us to be more cognizant of ourselves and see what that does for others. Don't worry about whether or not people are going to think you're, great or whatever, whatever the lie is that you're telling yourself. I want you to think about it deep, deep down. What's the lie that I'm telling myself? And send me those moments. I think it'd be kind of cool. Thanks, guys, so much for listening. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. It's going to pop up here. I appreciate you guys for growing this podcast. I cannot say it enough. It's growing. It's growing slowly, but it's growing, and that's okay. As long as we're reaching the people that this is supposed to reach, I don't care how fast it grows. This isn't about me. This is about you guys. I have my guest coming. Hopefully he gets some free time soon. We can chronicle his story. It's going to be super awesome. Yeah, that's really all I got, guys. Go forth this week and identify those moments. And let me know what you think. All right, guys, I will talk to you next time on the Screwup Chronicles. I am Robbie Millar.